All right, John, so you've been involved in some off-Broadway shows and some sketch comedy, and we're a part of the Star Search, which a lot of people probably don't know. If you can kind of go back to that portion of your career and just kind of tell us any experience from that time period.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, when you start out as an actor, you just feel so far from actually having a career in it, and I kind of had decided that no matter what I did, it would somehow have to be in the vein of being a performer, and I needed to try to make my living, no matter how small, at acting or performing. So right out of college, I got my first off-Broadway show and moved to New York, but it didn't last very long. They don't have a tendency to last very long. And I think I was getting paid $19.80, $175 a week. It's even by 1980 standards, that was pretty bad. So I shared an apartment with three other people, and lived in Spanish Harlem, and made most of my money street performing in front of the Metropolitan Museum, and an occasional theater job. Worked sketch comedy with some people I went to college with, and we had some success. Toured for the USO all over the world doing comedy for the troops and that kind of thing, which was kind of fun. And that kind of led to getting a part in an off-Broadway musical called Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down, which was about stand-up comics, and starring myself and Scott Bakula and a guy named Jerry Colker, who wrote the piece. The music was by Tony Award-winning Michael Rupert, Tony Award-winning performer, and it became a hit off-Broadway, and I played a very dark, kind of suicidal stand-up, and people assumed that was my background. So I was approached by Star Search, which was a brand new show on TV, and they said, "We would like you to be on our show." And I said, "What, is a singer?" They said, "No, it's a stand-up." And I said, "Well, I'm not really a stand-up." And they said, "Well, you could win $100,000. I went, "Fuck, I'll do it." So I tell you about my stand-up. It's pretty good, So each week I started out with some of my bits, and I didn't really have any material other than some of my sketch comedy. I had a bit where I would do the Wizard of Oz in 2.5 minutes and that kind of stuff, and each week I just kept writing new bits because I kept winning. So I kept having to come up with new Ernie Kovacs type, bizarre kind of wild things. I just kept winning, and I wound up in the semifinals against Rosie O'Donnell, and I beat her. And I wound up in the finals against Sinbad, and I beat him. And obviously they were very talented at what they did and have had success. And it launched my career. And it launched my career as a voice actor too, because everybody knew that I did all these voices in my act. So it was great. It moved me from barely making a living for the 6-7 years that I lived in Manhattan to having to being able to support myself for the last 31 years.
And in closing, it's TerrorCon. It's the Rhode Island Convention Center, Providence, Rhode Island. If you could channel your inner fan, what are your favorite horror movies over the years?
Well, I love coming to TerrorCon and other conventions because I get to see a lot of the horror stuff that I enjoyed. But most certainly anything with a theremin was my favorite. All the original Universal horror monster movies obviously you couldn't find them on Netflix and that kind of thing when I was a kid. You had to wait till they came on TV. So I would scan through the TV guide looking for when Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein would come on, or Boris Karloff in anything. Of course, I loved all the other sci-fi stuff that was 2,000 Miles from Earth, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, Mothra, that kind of stuff too. But as far as horror, when any of the Edgar Allan Poe stuff would come on with Vincent Price, that was, I remember going to the drive-in with my parents, and we were supposed to watch the kids movie and then go to sleep, and they stayed back at the station wagon while my parents watched the main feature, and the movie was Mask of the Red Death with Vincent Price, and I stayed awake through the whole thing, man. I was just like, this is cool, So horror's always been a part of me, whether I was performing it or not,
Appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, my pleasure, man.
Thank you.